Susannah Kell was 3 weeks a widow when she came on the wreck at Willow Draw. She was alone on the seat of a freight wagon, her husband's wagon. Her wagon now. The morning was cold and white with dust, and the crossing was a shallow creek that ran over red stones. And there, on the far side of the ford, a schooner lay on its side. It had gone over clean. The bows still held their canvas. One wheel turned slow in the air and stopped. Under the willows on the bank sat 4 children. They were not crying. That was the first thing wrong. Children come off a wreck screaming, and these 4 sat still as fence posts and watched her come. Susannah did not whip up her team to help. She stopped. And she counted. 4. She counted 4. Then she looked at the tailgate of the fallen wagon, where a trail hand chalks the load. And chalked there in white, plain as a brand, was a number. The number was 5. The tail of a 60 wagon train was still climbing the far bank. A man rode down off it. He was the wagon master, and his name was Amos Pruett, and he reined in beside her seat only long enough to touch his hat. "The train ahead will see to it, ma'am," he said, and he rolled his people on. He was the 4th outfit that morning to pass this wreck and leave it to the outfit in front. Not one of them was cruel. That's the part you'll want to remember. Not one. Susannah looked again at the tailgate. 5 in chalk, 4 in the willows, and then she got down and looked under the box, at the great iron pin that holds a wagon together, the kingbolt. And she went very still. If you have ever known the truth was sitting in plain sight, out in the open, while everyone waited for someone else to look, this story is for you. Before we go on, do something for me. Tap subscribe, and in the comments tell me the town you're watching from. I want to see how far down the road this story travels. Now, let's go back to the crossing, and take it slow, because everything that matters is already there in the dust. 3 weeks. That was how long Tom Kell had been in the ground. He'd been buried on a rise east of the Sweetwater, under a cairn of river rock, with a board Susannah had lettered herself. Fever took him in 2 days. A strong man, and then a sick man, and then a board. That fast, she had sat by the fresh stones 1 full night, and had not wept where anyone could see it, and in the morning she had greased the hubs and hitched the team and driven on. She was going to her sister in the Willamette Valley. There was nothing behind her now but a board. The other emigrants pitied her. You could see it in how they looked away. A woman alone on that road was a problem nobody wanted. No train would slow its pace for her. No captain would take on a lone widow's outfit and answer for it at the passes. So she rode in the loose space between trains, catching one for a day, dropping back, catching the next. She belonged to none of them. She was 3 weeks' worth of nobody's business, moving west at the speed of one tired team. But here is the thing they did not know about her. At a nooning 2 days back, she had knelt in the road and greased a hub. Just that. She jacked the wheel, pulled the linchpin, drew the wheel, and packed the box with tallow, and set it back, and drove the pin. All of it quick and sure, with her sleeves shoved up. And the men of that day's train had stood around and watched a woman do it, and they had gone quiet. Uneasy, because a woman was not supposed to know the parts. Susannah Kell knew the parts. She had rebuilt wagons beside Tom for 9 years. In a yard behind a wheelwright's shop in Missouri, she had learned to read a reach and a bolster and a hound the way a farmer reads weather. She could tell you by the tip marks in the dirt which way a load had gone and how fast. She could put her hand on a kingbolt and tell you if it was true. She had never once thought this a strange thing to know. It was only the trade. It was only Tom's trade, and hers. So when she came on the wreck at Willow Draw, and the road passed it by, she was, of all the 60 outfits on that cutoff, the one person alive who could read a wagon. She just didn't know yet that it would matter. She left her own team standing in the ford and walked up the bank to the children. The eldest was a boy of maybe 11. He had his knees drawn up and his arms around them, and his eyes were dry and hard in the way a boy's eyes get when he has decided he is the man now. The three little ones sat close to him. A girl of 6 or so, 2 smaller. They watched Susannah come and did not move. "Now then," she said. "Low. The way you talk to a spooked horse. Nobody's hurt bad? Let me look at you." The boy said, "Ma's under the sheet." Susannah looked where he didn't. There was a shape under a wagon sheet a little apart, laid out neat, and she understood, and she nodded once. Slow. "All right," she said. "All right, son, your pa?" "Rode ahead for help," the boy said. 2 days back, him and Uncle Elias. They said stay with the wagon, and they'd send the train ahead back for us. 2 days. Susannah kept her face still. 2 days is a long time to send help from up a road this crowded. 2 days is long enough for 40 wagons to pass. "What's your name?" "Halloran," the boy said. "Michael? And these?" He touched them each in turn. "That's Ruth. That's Jephthah. That's baby Sarah." His hand hung a moment in the air, over an empty place beside him, the way a hand does when it has counted a thing 1,000 times and can't stop. "And Nell?" he said. "Nell's 8. Nell went with Pa." Susannah counted on her fingers without meaning to. Michael, Ruth, Jephthah, Sarah, 4 in the willows, and Nell. 5. She looked back at the tailgate. 5. In white chalk, plain, a wagon master chalks his own children on the tailgate at a bad crossing, so that if the water takes one, he knows the number to look for downstream. 5 children. 5 chalked in a father's hand, and 4 sitting here, and 1 gone up the road with the men. That was all it was, right then. A number and a story that fit it. A father chalks 5, takes 1 girl ahead for help, 4 wait. It fit. It fit the way a thing fits when you have not yet had reason to test it. But Susannah had spent 9 years testing things that fit. She ran her hand along the reach, the long timber that runs the spine of the wagon, front axle to back. She did it the way Tom taught her, without thinking, just checking a load. And her hand stopped. There were marks in the wood. Fresh marks. Bright bruises where something iron had bitten and levered, all of them running the same way. She said nothing. She took her hand off the wood. She looked at the children, and she smiled, and she said, "You've done well, minding these little ones. I've a bit of hard bread and some molasses in my box. Let's feed the small ones while we think." And she thought. While the children ate, another rider came down the far bank. A younger man, on a good horse, hurrying to catch his own train's dust. He slowed when he saw the wreck and the woman, and Susannah lifted a hand and stepped toward him. "There's a family down here," she called. "Mother's dead. 4 children." The young man's face did the thing all their faces did. It closed, gentle and firm. "That's the Halloran's trouble, ma'am," he said. "They're with the marsh train, ahead of us. Their own outfit'll come back for 'em." He said it kind. He said it the way you'd tell a child a lost dog had surely found its way home. "You don't want to take on strays this late in the season. It ain't your affair to answer for." "There's a girl not accounted for," Susannah said. "Then she's with her pa, up ahead," he said, easing his horse past. "That's how it's done. You leave a wreck to the train it belongs to. Marsh has 'em." And he rode on. "You see how it works now. Nobody here is a villain. Every last one of them is only obeying the road. The road says a wrecked outfit belongs to its own train, and its own train will circle back, and to stop is to break the line and answer for strangers at the passes with winter coming. 30 men rode past those children that morning, and every one of them had a good reason. And every one of them was wrong in the same small way. They assumed. They assumed someone ahead had the count. They assumed it was handled. Susannah did not assume. She had watched Tom die of a thing everyone assumed would pass by morning. She had lost the habit of assuming. So, she did the loud thing first, before she did the quiet one. She got on her own wagon and drove hard to catch the tail of Pruett's train, and she pulled her team up alongside his last wagons where the men walked, and she called out that a child was missing off the wreck at the ford, that there were 4 where there should be 5, that somebody ought to send back and be sure. Amos Pruett came riding down the line to her. He was not an unkind man. I told you that. He was harried and gray and had bowsman trouble somewhere behind him and grass and water somewhere ahead, and a lone widow was slowing his tail wagons in a place he wanted them moving. "Ma'am," he said. "You've counted 4? 4 here. The tailgate chalks 5. The boy says the 5th went ahead with the father, 2 days back. 2 days, and no help come. Then she's ahead," Pruett said, with her paw on the marsh train, "where the boy told you she went." He rubbed his face. "Ma'am, I'll speak plain, and I mean no unkindness by it. A woman alone on a hard road, grieving, and I know you're grieving. I heard about your man, and I'm sorry for it. A woman in that state, counting frightened children in a wreck, she miscounts. It's no shame, anybody would. They scatter, they hide, you count 4 where there's 5, or 5 where there's 3. The marsh train has the father and the girl. Keep your place in the line, and let the folk whose business it is do their business." And the men around him, walking, listening, tired, they nodded. You could feel the relief come off them like heat, because a woman alone had just made a claim that would cost every one of them a half day and a hard conscience, and their captain had just handed the claim back to her as a grieving woman's mistake. Somebody else had the count. Somebody ahead. It was handled. The whole road, in one voice in that moment, handed the counting of a living child to someone else, and Susannah Kell stood in the dust beside her wagon with 60 outfits agreeing she was wrong, and she had never in her life been so alone. That is the truth of it. Not the wreck, not the dead mother under the sheet. This, a woman who could read a wagon better than any man on that road, told gently, by good men, to keep her place, because she was only a grieving widow who couldn't count. That was the loneliest moment of the whole long day. Hold on to it. Because everything after is the answer to it. She did not argue. Understand that about her. She did not shout, or weep, or grab a bridle and beg. Arguing was for people who thought words would move it. Susannah had greased that hub 2 days back, while men watched and said nothing, and she had learned young that you do not win a thing by telling a man he's wrong. You win it by being right where he has to see it. So she said, "All right, Mr. Pruett, thank you for your trouble." And she turned her team around and drove back down the road to the wreck. The train rolled on and left her to it. The dust of it hung and thinned and settled, and then there was only the creek running over red stone, and 4 children in the willows, and a shape under a sheet, and 1 wagon lying on its side in the morning cold. She went to the children first. She told Michael she was going to look the wagon over. He watched her with those hard, dry eyes and said nothing. And then Susannah Kell got down on her back in the wet sand and crawled under the box of the fallen wagon. It was dim under there, and it smelled of tar and axle grease and creek mud. She lay under the belly of it and let her eyes come to the dark, and she found the kingbolt. The kingbolt is the pin that holds the whole front of a wagon together. It runs down through the reach and the front bolster, and it lets the front axle swing so the wagon can turn. It is the one iron pin that everything else hangs on. When a wagon goes over hard, when it falls, the weight comes down and the bolt shears. It snaps forward, in the line of the fall. 9 years in a wagon yard, Susannah had seen a dozen sheared bolts, and every one of them told the same story in the same direction. A fall breaks a bolt forward. This bolt was not sheared. This bolt had been drawn. It sat half out of its seat, clean, no break in it at all, drawn straight up the way you pull a pin when you mean to take a wagon apart. Not snapped. Not bent. Pulled. Susannah lay there in the mud and the tar smell, and looked at it, and she understood what she was looking at, and she did not yet understand why. A wagon does not draw its own kingbolt. A wagon that falls shears the bolt forward. This one was drawn. Somebody pulled the pin, by hand, on purpose. Which meant the wagon had not gone over. It had been laid down. She lay very still under there for a while, long enough that Michael's voice came, small, from the willows. "Ma'am? You all right under there?" "I'm fine, son," she called back, easy, just looking at how she's built. And she made herself breathe slow. Then she crawled out, and she brushed the sand off her, and she went to her own wagon, and she opened her own toolbox. And this is the second thing I want you to see, because it is the whole of who she is. In that box, under the grub and the spare canvas, Susannah Kell carried Tom's freighting iron, a jack, a drawing bar, a heavy pin punch, the very kind of tools a body would use to lift a bolster and lever a reach and draw a kingbolt and lay a wagon down on its side without a mark of violence on it anywhere. She lifted the drawing bar out and turned it in her hands, and she went back to the wreck, and she fit its edge, gently, to one of those bright fresh marks levered into the reach. It fit. Of course it fit. It was the same kind of iron that made them. She was, of all 60 outfits on that road, not only the one who bothered to count, she was the one who owned the very tools that would tell her how it was done, and the eye, from 9 years in a yard, to read them. She stood there with Tom's drawing bar in her hand, and the morning sun coming up over the far bank, and the whole shape of it began to turn in her mind, slow, like that one wheel turning in the air. Somebody drew this bolt. Somebody levered this reach. All the marks run one way, which means somebody stood on one side and laid this wagon down deliberate. And the mother is dead under a sheet. And a girl of 8 is gone up a road with 2 men, 2 days back. And no help has come. She did not have the why yet. She would not have the why for hours. But she had this. The rick at Willow Draw was not a wreck. It was made to look like one. She could go back after Pruett with this. She knew that. She could catch his tail again and stand in the dust and say, "The bolt was drawn. I have looked. And I know." And she knew, standing there, exactly how it would go. A grieving widow who miscounts children, now saying the wagon was pulled apart on purpose, waving a bar she carried in her own box. They would look at each other. They would be kind. They would tell her to keep her place in the line. No, words would not move it. Words had already failed once this morning, in front of 60 outfits. So she did the quiet thing. She did not report it. She did not accuse. She knelt again by the reach, and she sighted along those lever marks, careful, the way you sight a rifle, reading the direction the iron had pushed. All of them levered toward the same side, toward the north bank, where a smaller trail branched off the main cutoff, up toward the higher country and, somewhere beyond, the Sweetwater Ferry. She went to Michael. She crouched to his level. "This Uncle Elias," she said. "Gentle? Your pa's brother?" "Cousin," the boy said. "Ma's cousin. He was traveling with us. Him and his people. 3 wagons. Then they went on ahead." His mouth worked. Pa said Uncle Elias knew the ferry road. That's where he took Nell. "Up the branch, toward the ferry." "Up the branch," Susannah said. "Ma'am." The boy caught her sleeve. His hard, dry eyes cracked, just for a second, into what they really were, which was terrified. "Nell can't count past 10. She gets scared she'll get left. She always makes me count her. Every night. She makes me say her name last, so she knows she's there." He swallowed. "Nobody said her name up the road. You're the only one who said her name." Susannah looked at him a long moment. Then she took his hand off her sleeve and held it in both of hers. "I'm going to walk up that branch trail, Michael," she said. "You're going to keep these little ones right here by my wagon. There's food in the box and water in the barrel. If a train stops, and one might, you tell them your name and you stay put. Can you hold this crossing for me?" The boy stared at her. "You're going after Nell." "I'm going to count her," Susannah said. "That's all. I'm going to walk up there and see for myself that the number's right, because nobody else on this whole road will." She stood. She tied her team off to the willows, good and firm, in the shade, with slack to reach the creek. She filled a canteen. She rolled hard bread and dried meat in a cloth. She took Tom's drawing bar, because a woman walking alone on a branch trailed toward two men, and a fairy ought to carry a piece of iron, and because it was Tom's, and holding it steadied her hand. Then she looked once at the sun. It was still climbing. There was a whole day of light in the sky. And the fairy, if the boy had it right, was a long way up that branch, and the branch ran into higher, harder country. A whole day. It seemed like plenty, standing in the morning cold at the crossing. She would learn different. Susannah Kell turned her back on the road, and the wreck, and the 60 outfits that had told her to keep her place. She faced the branch trail and the levered marks and the high country and the thin far line of the ferry road she could not yet see. And she started walking, up the trail, against the light. Behind her the creek ran over its red stones, and the one wheel had long stopped turning, and 4 children watched her go until the willows hid her, and the chalked number on the tailgate, 5, in a dead father's hand, stood white against the wood, waiting, still for someone to prove it true. The branch trail was not much of a trail. It was a gap in the sage, where wheels had gone once, maybe twice, pressed into the caliche just enough to leave a memory. She followed the memory. The marks Elias Spear's wagons had left were 2 days old, and the sun had been hard since. Most of what she read was pressure shade, the way the gravel sits different where a rim has rolled over it, where the crust cracks different under a full load than under the empty sky. Tom had taught her that. He'd taught her you could walk a loaded wagon backward in your mind, the same way you could run a sentence back to where the grammar broke. She walked it backward now, reading the ground the way he'd read it. And the ground said, heavy, 3 wagons, heavy, turning deliberate off the main road, not pushed off, not lost. Turned, she walked for an hour before she found the first cold camp. It sat in a hollow off the trail, screened by a stand of scrub juniper, far enough from the road that a fire would have shown as nothing more than a low star in the dark, if anyone had been looking. Nobody had been looking. 2 rings of ash, black and rained through, a kicked-out iron trivet, a scattering of bone fragments from whatever they'd eaten. Cold, 2 days at least, maybe 3. She crouched and pressed her palm to the ash. Nothing. She looked at the scuff marks in the dirt around the nearest ring, boot sizes she could sort by eye, the largest clearly a man's, then something smaller. She went still. There, half pressed into the soft dirt beside the trivet, was the print of a child's shoe. Small, the heel pointed east, toward the ferry road, not toward the main road, not toward the crossing, toward the Sweetwater. She rose. She did not let herself feel anything about it yet. 50 yards further up the trail she found a barrel stave propped in the fork of a juniper, like someone had set it there in a hurry and not looked back. It had been chalked. The chalk had run in the last rain, but she could still read it, the ghost of a letter, curved at the top. Maybe an H. She pressed her thumb to it. The chalk came off gray on her skin. She wiped her thumb on her trousers and kept walking. The sun was crossing noon when she reached higher ground, and the trail began to bend east to meet the ferry road. Here the going was harder, the soil was rocky, the marks thinner, and she slowed, looking. Twice she nearly lost the track entirely and had to cast wide, quartering the hillside like a dog working a field, before she caught a fresh scar on a limestone shelf where a shod hoof had scraped it. 1 horse, then a second, walking deliberate. And between them, in the soft margin where the shelf gave back to soil, a stride that was too short for a man and too long for a small child sitting easy. She measured it with her eye. 8, maybe 9 years old. Walking between two horses, not riding. Walking because someone thought it was less conspicuous than a child over a saddle. Her hand tightened on Tom's iron bar. She looked at the sky. The sun had moved more than she'd wanted. The cold camp and the barrel stave and the careful quartering had cost her, and the ferry road was still higher, and the light, the clean, friendly light she'd been counting on, was no longer sitting still and waiting. It was burning. Steady, westward, burning. She put her head down, and she walked faster. She walked, and while she walked, she said it out loud, low, the way Tom used to talk himself through a bad axle. A wagon that falls shears its kingbolt forward. She had seen it happen. She had mended it after. When a schooner tips on a grade, the box lunges ahead of the running gear, and the bolt that pins them takes the whole weight sideways, and it breaks with a bright torn face. Forward. Always forward. She had held those broken bolts in her hand. They looked like something that had lost a fight. This one had not lost a fight. This one had been drawn. Clean. The nut backed off, the pin lifted straight up out of its seat, and the box laid over by hand and by lever after the pin was already gone. There was no tear in it. There was no fight in it at all. Somebody had unpinned that wagon the way you unpin a wagon you mean to put back together, and then they had set it on its side in the willows and chalked a number on the tailgate and walked away. The overturned wagon had not overturned. It had been laid down. She stopped on the trail and stood with that. The wind moved the grass. Off east she could hear the river now, the Sweetwater, a long, steady sound like breath. And she let herself do the sum she had been keeping back. Elias Spear. Uncle, the boy had called him. Not an uncle. A cousin. Cousin to the dead woman under the sheet, close enough to travel in the same string of wagons, close enough that 4 children trusted him to ride ahead for help. She thought about the valley the Hallorans were going to. A land patent. Bottom ground and water. Worth near $4,000 to a man who had none. A patent like that passed to blood. But only if the blood was gone. If the whole family went into a creek at Willow Draw, a mother, a father, 5 children, nobody on this road would ever count them. That was the thing of it. That was the cold, clean cleverness of it. 60 outfits a morning rolled past a wreck and left it to the train ahead. 30 men would ride by and tip their hats and never once ask how many were supposed to be sitting in those willows. A wreck belonged to its own train. Its dead belonged to its own people, and its people were dead. The safest place in the world to murder a family was a busy road, because on a busy road nobody establishes the number. Except one. Except a chalk 5 and a widow who counted to 4. Nell had not died in that wreck. Susannah understood it now, whole and terrible. Nell had not been in the wreck at all. Nell had been taken up the branch 2 days back, walking between 2 horses, because a man cannot chalk 5 and leave 4. Somebody had noticed the count was short by 1 living child. And rather than lay that child in the creek where a passing outfit might see and remember a small face, they had walked her off quiet, up the branch, toward the ferry, toward the far side of the river and out of the territory, to be lost somewhere no chalk would ever be read. Lost by dark. Susannah looked at the sun. It sat low and red and going. The light she had counted on was almost spent. She went up the last of the rise near running, her boots skidding on the loose rock, Tom's iron bar in her fist, and she came over the top of the ferry road, and she saw the fires. 3 wagons, drawn up neat off the road in a bend of the river, where the ford ran to the Sweetwater ferry. A picket line of horses, a cook fire going, and a man beside it feeding it sticks. Easy, unhurried, a man with all the time in the world, and none of the fear. She was too far to see his face. She did not need to. She counted the wagons, and she counted the horses, and she counted the men, 3 of them, and then she counted the children. And there were none. For one long breath, the whole day fell out from under her. 11 hours, a cold camp and a shoe print, and a chalked stave, and 100 careful reeds of ground, and she had walked all of it up to a fire, with no child at it. She stood in the last of the light with her husband's bar in her hand, and she thought, for one breath, that she had been a fool the way they all said, a grieving woman who miscounts frightened children. That the girl was already across, already gone, already, a wagon sheet moved. The middle wagon. Down at the low corner where the canvas was laced to the box. A small hand came out and took the edge of the sheet and held it, just held it, the way a child holds a blanket in the dark. Fingers, a child's fingers, curled in the failing light. Susannah's knees nearly went. She did not run. That was the hardest thing she had ever not done. Every part of her wanted to cross that ground screaming, but she made herself stand, and she made herself think, and she looked at the 3 men and the fire and the rifles she could not see but knew were there, and she understood that if she came in shouting, the girl would be back inside that sheet and across that river before she reached the wheel. So she did the other thing. She came in slow. She came off the rise and down onto the ferry road, walking like a traveler at the end of a long day, tired, harmless, a woman alone. She slid Tom's bar up her sleeve, cold along her forearm. She let her shoulders drop. She let her feet drag. And when the man at the fire heard her and rose and turned, she lifted a hand the way you do when you don't want to be shot, and she called out, tired and plain, "Evening. This the Sweetwater crossing? I'm trying to make the ferry." The man stood easy. He was tall and unhurried, and he had a good coat, better than a trail coat. Elias Spear looked at her across his fire, and he was not afraid at all, and that told her everything about what he thought a woman alone was worth. "Ferry don't run past dark," he said. "You're late for it, ma'am, but there's coffee if you want it, and you're welcome to it." "I'd take coffee," she said. She came into the firelight. She let him pour it. She took the tin in both hands and she blew across it, and she looked, once, slow, around the camp like a tired traveler taking her bearings, and past his shoulder she found the low corner of the middle wagon, and the sheet, and behind the sheet a paleness that was a face. Elias Spear was saying something about the ford and the water being up. She was not listening to him. She set the tin down on a rock, careful, and she looked past the man entirely, past his easy shoulders and his good coat. And she spoke to the wagon. "Nell Halloran," she said. Her voice did not shake. She was surprised it did not shake. "Nell, your brothers are down at the crossing counting willows for you. Michael's got the little ones. He won't quit till he's got 5. The camp went dead still. The sheet trembled. And then it came back, and a girl was there, small and white-faced and dirty, 8 years old and cold to the bone, and she looked at Susannah with the whole of her heart in her eyes, and she said the only thing an 8-year-old who cannot count past 10 says, "Is Michael really there?" "He's really there," Susannah said. "And Ruth, and Jephthah, and the baby. That's 4. You make 5. Elias Spear's hand went inside his coat. Susannah let Tom's bar drop out of her sleeve into her palm. "I wouldn't," she said. They stood there, the 2 of them, over the fire, the girl half out of the sheet, the 2 other men rising now from the far wagons, slow, uncertain, because this was not the plan, and the plan had no place in it for a widow who read wagons. "You've walked a long way to be wrong, ma'am," Elias said. Soft, reasonable. A man reasonable to the last. "That child's my sister's girl. Orphaned in a bad wreck back on the cutoff. I'm carrying her to kin across the river. It's a hard thing and a sad thing, and it's none of yours." "The wreck wasn't bad," Susannah said. "The wreck was drawn. You backed the nut off the kingbolt, and you lifted the pin, and you laid that box over by hand. A wagon that falls shears its bolt forward. That one didn't fall. There's not a tear on it. I crawled under, and I put my hand on it. She did not raise her voice. She kept it flat and even, a wheelwright, reading a wheel. You left the pin marks on the reach where you levered it. My husband taught me those marks 9 years back. I've got the very bar in my hand that makes them. You laid down a wagon on top of a woman, and you chalked 5 on the tailgate, and you forgot that 5 was a number somebody might read. Something moved behind Elias's easy face. Not fear yet. The first crack before fear. You can't prove a chalk mark, he said. I don't have to. Susannah said. The bolt proves it. The bolt's still under the box. It'll be under the box tomorrow. And the day after, and whenever a man who knows a kingbolt from a nail comes to look. You can shoot me, Elias. You'll still have to move a wagon nobody can undraw. And that was when the horses came. 2 riders, up the ferry road from the crossing, coming hard in the last light, and Elias's head turned toward them the way a man's head turns when the thing he was sure of stops being sure. Susannah knew the shapes before she knew the faces. She had watched one of them ride past a wreck that morning and tip his hat. Amos Pruett came off his horse before it fully stopped. Behind him a cavalryman swung down, blue coat gone gray in the dusk, a sergeant's stripes, a carbine already in his hands. Ord Bassett. He had a lantern hung on his saddle, and he took it down and lit it with a soldier's economy while his eyes went around the camp and counted, the way a man counts who has learned to. Ms. Kell, Pruett said. He was breathing hard. He looked older than he had that morning. We found your team tied at the willows. The boy told us which way you walked. He stopped. He looked at the girl half out of the wagon sheet and at the tall man by the fire with his hand still inside his coat, and something went across his face that Susannah would remember a long time. God forgive me, he said. You said a child was missing. You said it to my face and I told you you'd miscounted. I know what you told me, Susannah said. She was not cruel about it. She was too tired to be cruel. Sergeant, there's a wagon down at Willow Draw with a woman under it. I need you to look at how it fell. That's all. Just look at the bolt. Bassett had come to log an accident. She could see it on him. He had ridden the cutoff all season, logging accidents, and he wanted this to be one, because an accident is a thing a man writes down and rides away from. He looked at her like she was more trouble than the whole Bozeman Road. But he was a man who counted, and he had counted this camp. 3 wagons, no woman, no other children. 1 small girl carried by 3 grown men toward a ferry that didn't run past dark, and the count was wrong, and he knew it was wrong. Show me the bolt, he said. Not here. That one. He nodded down the road, toward the draw, toward the wreck. In the morning. There's a child cold tonight, Susannah said. Look at the bolt in the morning. Look at the child now. Elias tried once more. He was good at it. Sergeant, this woman's followed us out of grief. She lost her own man 3 weeks back. Everybody on the road knows it. She's not right. I'm carrying my orphaned kin. Whose girl? Bassett said. My sister's. She just called you uncle. Bassett tilted his head at Nell, who had come all the way out of the sheet now and was standing on the wagon tongue in her bare feet. Girl, this man your uncle? Nell looked at Elias. Whatever a child cannot say in words, she said with her body. She stepped back from him, along the tongue toward Susannah, one bare foot behind the other. He's Ma's cousin, Nell said. He told me Pa was waiting at the river. Pa's not at the river. Her voice cracked right down the middle. Nobody's at the river. Where's Pa? Nobody answered her. That was answer enough. Susannah watched it land on the child, and she watched the child understand. And it was the worst thing in that whole camp, worse than the fire and the rifles and the drawn bolt, an 8-year-old learning the shape of 2 days by a river in 1 sentence. Susannah held out her hand. Nell crossed the last of the tongue and took it, and Susannah pulled her in against her side and turned her face away from the man who had walked her up the branch. "You count willows," Susannah said quiet into her hair. "You count them for Michael. I've got you." Bassett moved then. He set the lantern down and he brought the carbine up level, and he said, "Take your hand out of your coat, mister, slow, and empty." For one breath the whole camp balanced on it. The two other men by the far wagons had guns, and Susannah knew it, and the sergeant knew it, and it could have gone the other way in the dark. But Elias Spear looked at the girl standing safe against the widow's hip, and at the soldier's carbine, and at the wagon master who had ridden 11 miles back into the dusk because a miscount would not let him sleep, and Susannah watched the whole clever machine of him come apart. He had built it all on nobody counting. And they were all counting now. He took his hand out of his coat. "Empty, that's a mistake," he said. "To no one. To the fire. That land's mine by right. There's no Halloran left standing between me and it but a girl who can't get past 10. There's 5 Hallorans standing," Susannah said. "And she can get to 5 now. I taught her on the way to you." They took him with rope, not with a shot, and Susannah was glad of that, glad the day did not end in blood in front of the child. Bassett had the 2 other men lay down their rifles in the grass, and they did it sullen and quiet, the fight gone out of them the moment their fine, safe plan turned into a soldier with a carbine and a witness who could read iron. Pruett tied the horses off. Nobody said much. The river went on breathing in the dark. While Bassett bound Elias, the sergeant did a thing Susannah did not ask him to. He took his lantern, and he walked down the ferry road a little way, alone, and she knew he was going to the draw, to the wreck, to the bolt, because he was a man who could not carry a thing on another's word if there was iron he could put his own hand on. She let him go. She waited. He came back different. He came back the way a man comes back from a thing he cannot unsee. He set the lantern down by the fire, and he looked at Susannah for a long moment, and then he looked at Amos Pruett, and he said the words like they cost him. That bolt was pulled. His voice was flat and hard and certain. "I put my hand on it same as she did. There's no shear. There's no tear." Somebody backed the nut and lifted the pin and laid that wagon over on a living woman by hand. "I've logged 40 wrecks on this road, and I never saw one drawn." He shook his head. "Slow. It's not an accident. I'll swear to it at the post." Amos Pruett made a sound. Susannah looked at him. The wagon master was standing with his hat in his hands, and he was not looking at Elias, and he was not looking at the sergeant. He was looking at nothing, at the middle distance, at that morning. "The train ahead will see to it," he said. Just that, his own words, come back on him in the dark. "That's what I told the rider who pointed. That's what I told you. 4 outfits passed that draw before me, and every one of us said it. The train ahead." He put his hat on and took it off again, a man who did not know what to do with his hands. There was no train ahead. There was never any train ahead. There was just her. He looked at Susannah, and there was no argument left anywhere in him. "You counted. 30 men rode past, and I was one of them, and not one of us counted, because counting was somebody else's to do." He stopped. "I'm going to be a long time forgiving myself that." "Then count from now on," Susannah said. She was not angry at him. She had never really been angry at him. He was not a cruel man. He was a busy man on a hard road who had mistaken the rule of the road for the care he owed a stranger, and the road had spoken through him in one careless voice, and it had almost cost a family everything. That's all. Count. Every wreck you pass the rest of your life, you stop and you count heads, and you don't ride on till the number sits right. That's the whole of it, Mr. Pruett. That's all any of this ever was. They went back down to the crossing by lantern, the whole strange procession of them, the sergeant with his prisoner roped to a saddle, the wagon master leading horses, the widow with the girl asleep across the front of her body, too spent to walk the last mile. The Sweetwater fell away behind them in the dark, and when they came down at last into the willows at Willow Draw, into the little firelight where Susannah had left 4 children by her wagon, a boy of 11 stood up out of the dark with a stick in his hand like a soldier who had refused his post to no one, and he came forward stiff and scared and trying to be a man, and he looked at the shape in Susannah's arms. "Is that—" Michael could not finish it. Susannah knelt down in the grass, careful, and she set his sister on her feet in the firelight, and Nell stood there swaying and blinking, and Michael Halloran looked at her, and Susannah watched the boy's mouth move without sound. She knew what he was doing. He was doing the thing he did every night so his sister would not be afraid of the dark. He was counting Ruth, Jephthah, Sarah, the baby, in the wagon, himself, and now, at last, Nell 5, he said. His voice broke clean in half on it. "That's 5. That's all of us. That's 5. That's all of you," Susannah said. He did not cry in front of her. He was 11 and the man of the family, and he held it. But he pulled his sister in against him and put his face down into the top of her head, and his shoulders shook, and Ruth woke and came stumbling, and then they were all of them tangled up in the willow light, all 5, and Susannah stood back out of it and let them be. It was not hers to be inside of. She had only carried the count home. What they did with it was theirs. Bassett came and stood beside her. He had his report already writing itself behind his eyes, she could tell. "Nearest post is a half-day back," he said. "I'll take him in at first light. Coroner'll want the wagon left as it lies till he's read it himself. You'll have to swear to what you found under the box." "I'll swear to it," she said. "You read all that off a bolt and a chalk mark." He said it like he still could not quite make it fit in his head. "Off marks in the ground." "A woman alone. My husband was a wheelwright," Susannah said. 9 years I built wagons alongside him. I know what a kingbolt does when a wagon falls, and I know what it looks like when a man lifts one out by hand. That's not a gift, Sergeant. That's a trade. She looked at the 5 children by the fire. "The only strange thing about today is that I was the only one of 60 outfits who happened to know it, and that any of you left the knowing to somebody else." Bassett had no answer for that. He wrote it down instead. She saw the line of it later, when it mattered, and it read the way she'd have written it herself. Not an accident. Established by a passing freighter. The rest was weeks. The Valley patent went into trust for Nell, held for the 5 of them till they came of age, tied up tight where no cousin's hand could reach it. Elias Spear went to the post roped to a saddle, and from the post to the coroner, and from the coroner to the law of the territory, and no violence was done to him on the road, and Susannah was glad of that too. She had not gone up the branch for revenge. She had gone up for the number. The number was 5, and the number was safe, and that was the whole of what she'd wanted. Amos Pruett held his 60 wagons at the draw 3 days for the coroner, which cost him grass and water, and put the Bozeman worry at his back, and he did not complain of it once. And Susannah heard, later, from a rider on the road, that the wagon master of that big train had taken to a new habit at every dawn. Before he rolled his people out, he walked the line with a nub of chalk, and he marked his own count on his own tailgate, and he checked it against the drivers, every morning, out loud. So that no outfit of his would ever again be a number nobody read. The Halloran children went west with a train that knew their number now. 5, and a widow's blessing, and a father in the ground at Willow Draw with a real stone, not a drawn one. Michael learned to drive the mended wagon himself. Nell learned to count past 10 before the Willamette. Susannah made sure of it, sitting the girl beside her on the seat through the long afternoons, 5 and then 6, and then all the way up, so the dark would never again be a place where a man could tell her pa was waiting. And Susannah Kell drove on toward her sister with the season closing at her back. She made South Pass before the snow. She was 3 weeks a widow when she found that wreck, and she was many more than that by the time she came down the far side of the mountains. And she carried her husband's tools in her own box the whole way, the jack and the drawing bar and the heavy pin punch, the iron that had read the truth out of a lie. But this is the thing she kept. The thing she'd tell you if you sat by her fire and asked how a woman alone had done it. She'd say she didn't do anything clever. She'd say the truth had been sitting in plain sight the whole morning, a chalk 5, 4 children, a bolt any wheelwright could read, sitting right there on a busy road for 30 men to find. The truth wasn't hidden. It never is, mostly. It just didn't belong to anybody. Everyone was sure it was somebody else's to check. And a thing that belongs to everybody belongs to no one, and it will sit there in the willows in plain sight forever, until one person decides it is theirs. So she decided. And for the rest of that long road, every wreck she came on, every wagon down at every ford, Susannah Kell did the same thing. She didn't whip up to help, and she didn't ride past and leave it to the train ahead. She stopped, and she counted. If you're still with me at the end of this one, comment the town you're watching from. I want to see how far down the road this story travels.